Hi, this is David with EV World News. We talk about electric vehicles, green energy, and the stock markets. I'm in studio today with our founder and chief editor, Bill Moore. How's it going, Bill?
I am doing fabulous, sir. Thank you for asking.
All right. And X.com, Twitter, or whatever is still not being cooperative today. But if
Yeah,
you're out there listening on LinkedIn or Facebook or YouTube, we are broadcasting loud and clear, but we are having challenges. As we've been doing this, we've had challenges with Facebook. We've had challenges with LinkedIn occasionally. And now we're having challenges with Twitter's new system because
yeah.
Twitter,
Well,
um, you know,
decided to
they need some more revenue.
monetize. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, anyways, so our lead story today came kind of in a weird way, or at least in my opinion. We're going to talk about electric buses a little bit, and we've talked about electric buses in the past, both
Mhm.
failures of manufacturing. Like we talked about Proterra.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
talked a little bit about Bluebird before. We haven't really talked. I don't think we ever talked about Thomas buses, but it seems like every bus manufacturer is getting into the EV space now.
Well, encouraged by federal grants and loans and things of that nature. Yeah.
Well, I think school buses make a very interesting play because it's
Yep.
not like you're going to drive 1,000 miles that day in the school bus.
Right.
They do drive a fair amount. There's no question, but it seems like a spot that's perfect for electrification. You've got the kids on the bus. I remember as a kid being on a bus and smelling that diesel smell. I
Yep.
didn't like that,
Yep.
because you don't have air conditioning in those things. You got the windows open and
Everybody's
the
windows are
fumes are
down.
coming
Yeah.
right back in.
Yep.
Yeah. And, I've seen people, it's like, oh, the kids aren't dying. Well, no, they're not dying right there, but you never know. You got kids with asthma and all kinds of other problems.
And
Who
maybe they
knows?
have asthma because of the bus. So.
Yeah. You just never really know. You never really know. And
Well,
I'm settled.
I did that story on the ship hold, the study of the aircraft operating, or the schools and things that operate within sort of the flight path of the Netherlands, the Schiphol airport. And they found that there was a direct link between the aircraft traffic moving in and out of Schiphol airport, which is the airport for Amsterdam, and the numbers of cases of asthma and things like that. So you got there, it's jet fuel or diesel fuel. It's the same stuff. One's a little more refined than the other, but this stuff is, instead of being dispersed, 5,000 feet over the kids' heads, it's right there in their backpack, so to speak. So yeah, you can see where there'd be a problem with it.
Yeah, sometimes, and I'm not disputing that piece, but you've also got the issues of people who live near airports tend to be they're typically in economically disadvantaged areas too. And so you've got a couple of things. One, you got noise pollution and the pollution from
Mhm.
that. But on the flip side, the people in lesser advantaged areas generally may not take as good care of their health to start with.
Well, that can
So
be taken into
it
consideration, but
exacerbates problems.
yeah, I can't. Well, all right, I do not. I have been to the Netherlands long time ago, briefly for a trip, but I can't speak to the neighborhoods around the ship hole. So if we have listeners that might be, there in the Netherlands, I'd love to hear your comments about what do you consider those neighborhoods, or those sort of typical, what we would say, disadvantaged communities, or are they not? I mean, it'd be interesting to hear if there's a relationship to that. But anyway, I'm sorry, I'm interrupting, getting off talking flying as
no,
opposed to
no,
school buses, but
no, but
they're
it's
both running
true.
on
It's
fossil
true.
fuels. So
Yeah, there's no question that we talk about this a lot during the COVID years, or at least during 2020. The, the skies over major cities cleared up.
cleared up.
We got, and the air quality got better. There's no question, and that's and it's probably going to be 15 years before we see that complete effect from electric
Yeah.
vehicles, but we should see that much of an impact from electric vehicles around the world, probably in anywhere in the next 10 to 20 years,
Well, where that
and
sort
see
of,
that cleaned up.
yeah, where that got demonstrated was the Olympics in Atlanta.
Hmm.
They restricted they limited the amount of commuter traffic and things in and around downtown Atlanta, where the Olympics were held. And guess what? The numbers of asthma cases being reported to emergency rooms plummeted. So there is that
Oh,
correlation.
wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no question.
Same thing, which is the reason they turned off all the industries in Beijing for the 2008 Olympics, because the air was so, I've been there twice and I can tell you the air was bad, really bad there. And so if you, stop all that industry for the period of, week and a half or whatever it is for the Olympics, the air gets clean. So, there's a link between all these pollutants, and automobiles and coal and things like that we're burning, and what happens to our air quality and what happens to our health. So that's why we want to get those kids out of those diesel buses and get them into electrics as expeditiously as possible. And
Well,
the administration is making that happen.
yeah, so I want to highlight some of the articles that we've had come up on this. Fairfax County, this is in Virginia, receives a $50 million grant for hybrid buses. Now, in the picture, it seems to show buses that are city buses as opposed to school buses, but still, that's a pretty big deal. The grants for hybrid buses instead of electric buses, because the infrastructure is not there yet. They need chargers for the bus facility, and the county is going to be working on that. Let's see. Maryland received $12 million in federal funding to expand electric vehicle charging stations across the state, 130 fast chargers at 23 sites. So, that one's a little different for the hybrid buses. Then we get into, let's see, we'll look at this next article. It says Fayetteville. I'm going to assume Fayetteville, North Carolina.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. And this one, Fayetteville gets $6.6 million for electric buses and charging stations. Now, I'm going to guess, because electric buses are pretty expensive, I'm going to guess they probably are getting about 8 buses, maybe. Let's see if it says how many they're getting. And it does not say. I guess they're probably getting around 8 buses plus charging stations for them. 4 battery electric buses, 2 additional charging stations, and 2 charging dispensers. I don't know what the charging dispensers means. Do you know what that is?
I would think that would be just another name for the, EVSE, the electric vehicles, charging station. So I don't know what their definition is. Hey, one thing that we should make our listeners, readers, I guess viewers aware of is, in relationship to this electric bus, there's an article that I posted a link to on the RSS stream. It's electric bus transition strategies to avoid common pitfalls. And I think that if you're in the school district or have some kind of a say in the planning of bus services and things like that for your school district, this is an interesting article. It's put out by actually Schneider Electric, but it gives some really, really, I think, valuable tips on what to consider beyond you got the bus, but now what do you do with it? So you might want to take a look at that. It's like in the current stream that's up, it's like number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, like about the 7th article down. Electric bus transition strategies to avoid common pitfalls. So you might want to take a look at that, but that's in relationship. There's every day there are, I don't know, 20, 30 stories about what's happening with electric buses. And there's a huge push within the Biden administration to get funding out there for not only the manufacture of the buses, $80 million going to Bluebird down in Macon, Georgia. There's the company out in Phoenix EV says it delivered 5 electric buses to the University of California. So, there's all kinds of things that are happening in that. And we tend to always think about, Teslas and Rivians and, whatever, Ford Lightnings and all of that.
Mhm.
But this is just as important. In fact, in some respects, it may actually be a more effective way to get carbon emissions and things down. Plus, the added benefit when this is engineered right is to get the grid stabilization, because those buses that take the kids to school in the morning, they come back to the central lot, they're plugged in, they're being charged very possibly by solar energy, during the day, and then they unplug them, and 3 o'clock they're back out on the road for the next couple hours, delivering kids at home, bring them back into the lot, they get charged in, and now whatever extra electricity they may have or the grid might have at this point can be stored on them, and then that can be used to to help stabilize the grid. And these are not little battery packs of 50 to 100 kilowatt hours. These are pretty sizable and can do a lot of good for the grid as well as for their kids' health. So that's an area to watch. And I really take an interest in what's going on in the e-bus arena.
I think it's going to take a long time for the average person to really understand the importance of the grid stabilization from vehicle to grid strategies, because everybody that's kind of in the space and knows what you and I know, or knows what Mike Herzog knows it's going to be a huge part of storing the energy from solar and wind and making that effectively go through the system. People don't realize that these are just giant batteries driving around, and when they're parked and connected to the grid, they can be going either way. They can be either supplying power or they can be receiving power, and it's just it's going to, like you said, it's going to be a huge part of balancing the grid, load balancing. And people always think that all of a sudden, because we've seen Norway already go to mostly EVs, and it didn't crash their grid. And so it's already being done. I don't know that Norway's doing much with vehicle to grid, but their grid was able to handle it. I don't see why the U.S. grid wouldn't be able to handle it as well. But this article here from Phoenix, a company called Phoenix EV, delivers 5 electric buses to a University of California, Irvine. Now, what I found was kind of interesting about this particular article. Now, California Irvine has actually had an electric fleet since January of 2018, and the first university in the U.S. to go all electric. They have 25 buses in its fleet, and they've logged almost 1.2 million miles. Bus ridership let me see, was almost 1.5 million people for last school year, while annually hitting about 185,000 miles, averaging about 3,500 miles a week. But what was interesting is charging costs them 37 cents per mile to drive the bus, compared to $1.53. So that's a 75% savings. Just what they would have spent on diesel. So never mind, cleaning up the air, cleaning up the carbon. It definitely is cleaning up the pocketbook. Okay.
Now,
so there's
this particular company, I know a little of the history. They started off with basically converting a pickup truck to electric, and they debuted. I was at the debut. Was at the what's that famous automobile? I hate old age. I can't remember names anymore. But they debuted at the Peterson. There we go, Peterson Museum. Which is where I got a chance to hug Daryl Hannah, the actress who was there also. But that's how they started out. They started out with a truck, and then you can see a little bit what they've done there, and then shifted into got bigger and bigger, vehicles, and now they're looking at 40-foot buses, which is great.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a natural thing, but it is an impressive when you're talking about 75% savings. And that was just in fuel. That's not including the savings in maintenance. So that's a pretty big deal. And I'm sure they do use tires occasionally. They're not going through tires every 4,000 miles.
Yeah. We're not going to let anybody doubt, get away with that kind of crap. We're going to keep rubbing that salt in that wound. So,
Man, that one story never is going to go away.
no, 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 no,
I
no,
mean, I get
no.
that people all the time talking about, oh, but the particulates from your
Yeah,
EVs is like, oh
yeah, yeah,
God,
yeah, yeah,
one article got picked up somewhere,
yeah.
you know,
Well,
and
what was it? The lie, was it Mark Twain? Lies, get around to go around the world, before the truth gets its boots on, or something to that to
yeah,
that effect. Yeah.
well, there's certainly something to that. I mean, I really don't know.
And by the way, we're not the only. I'm going to give you a segue. We're not the
Mhm.
only ones frustrated with the amount of misinformation that is being put out there about electric vehicles. We're going to talk at some point here about Sandy Munro and Robert Llewellyn interview that was done about 3 days or so ago. Sandy, who is, some people will know. Average person not going to know him, but Sandy, runs a company called Monroe Associates, and their job is to take cars, particularly now electrics. That's their main focus now, and take them apart down piece by piece by piece, and then analyze the costs, and then show manufacturers how they can improve and cut costs and lighten the vehicles and all that thing. So Sandy is a well respected auto engineer, as well as aeronautics, as a matter of fact. And he goes into reviewing what these cars are like, and so he and Robert Llewellyn, who is a Brit that's gotten involved, in electric vehicles, did an interview about, what do they call it? The crisis, China crisis, something like that.
Yeah,
But anyways, talking about the electric vehicle industry, and one of the things that leads off that interview is how frustrated he is. He says, I stopped listening basically to the news. I read stuff that's pertinent to my interests as an engineer and on EVs. But he says they're just so frustrated the amount of lies that are being spewed out there by the media. So we
you
we
know,
share something in common, Sandy.
I see errors on all kinds of topics that people are
Oh,
trying to produce news. And I'm not going to say that we don't ever make mistakes. I mean,
oh
God,
no.
if we make a math mistake on here, somebody is really quick to correct us in the comments. You
Yeah,
know,
math is not my forte. Believe me, I
oh no,
admit it.
I had the best comment ever on one of my videos I did with Mike Herzog, who is a professional engineer who
Right.
specializes in electric grid and public utilities.
Yes.
And he's licensed in multiple states. And
Right.
somebody
And
said, we need,
he is a real PE, right? I mean,
yeah,
that's something you
yeah.
just don't go and, send off a diploma, mill for. That's a real thing to account to get one of those.
No,
So
we have somebody commented, you guys really need to learn some electrical math. And I just like
yeah.
on one of the videos I did with Mike, and I'm just like, wow, yeah, I don't know how much more he could learn. He had at least 6 calculus classes, to get the, I
Hey,
don't know.
I took a class at community college, in electricity. That's the extent of
Yeah,
my knowledge, and it's obvious, and I admit it. And I'm more into the policy and the vehicle design and utilization and things of that nature. Not so much into the math,
I,
and
I I do get engineers that leave comments, but they're usually quite constructive, and they're
yeah,
typically explaining something in greater detail than maybe we covered in the show, which I
yeah.
always appreciate that. I
Thank
like those
you.
comments. I
Yes,
like to see that they're not being condescending and saying, "Oh, you did this wrong." I mean,
yeah,
I will sometimes say kilowatt when I meant kilowatt hour. I'll get
right.
those mixed up all the
Yep,
time, and it'll
yep,
drive certain people crazy.
yep.
And I really don't, know what to say.
I've been,
I pronounce Chinook Chinook helicopters wrong every
oh,
time. You
yeah,
know, I don't know. I mean, it's just it's easy. It's not like I've been around those all the time. You
yeah,
know, or when I pronounce my close personal friend Elon Musk's name wrong. They, there used to be
Yeah,
this commercial where a guy was joking, "Oh yeah, my close personal friend Bjorn Borg," you know, you know, and you know, for the tennis player that probably nobody
right,
else has heard of on this show, Bjorn Borg,
right,
but it
right.
was always just kind of funny to say Bjorn, you know,
Bajorn.
and it's, yeah,
Well,
Bjorn
why do
Borg.
they put that stupid, BJ? Why do they put that J in there?
Yeah, well,
Particularly when
that's
they call
the
it just,
Swedish.
Bjorn. But
Yeah, yeah, all the Scandinavian countries pronounce that like it was Byorn.
right,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, more power to them, right? But
yep,
anyways, yeah, so the Teardown Titan on America's China Crisis is on the Everything Electric show. And anyways, you can catch that on YouTube. There's a link to it from the evworld.com site as
right.
well.
The interesting thing is he spends a fair amount of time talking about Lucid, which
Hmm.
you and Mike, of course, talked about yesterday, and you guys are on the same track here,
Well,
about the fact that, hey, it's got all the Saudis. The Saudis aren't going to let that let that investment evaporate. I mean, they may have second thoughts about that 100-mile long Neom or whatever it's called, or the resort that they're going to build on the Red Sea. They may have some second thoughts and scaling back on that, but I don't see them doing that in the case of Lucid. That is too damn. Speaking of which, too damn good a car. They have just said, and it'd be nice to see if there's third-party verification of this, but that car is the most efficient EV now in the world, getting 5 miles per kilowatt. Are we saying this right? Kilowatt hours?
it is. That is correct. Yeah.
Yeah,
I was really surprised to see that they were saying it gets 5 kilowatt or 5 miles per kilowatt hour,
yeah,
because that's a lot, because like your typical Tesla gets about 3.5.
yeah.
Now, there are a fair amount of cars when you start getting into these super light, small ones that get as
Right.
much as 8 to 12.
Oh yeah.
I've even seen 13. And if you got on a bicycle, it might have a 20-mile range, and it's probably what, half a kilowatt hour on the
If that.
battery.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it really depends on the weight you're obviously that you're putting on those wheels, but that's that's kind of
Yeah.
interesting that's going on there. Yeah, I think like we talked about yesterday, some of the stuff with Rivian, especially now that you have Volkswagen jumped in bed with them.
Hmm.
So now you've got Amazon followed by Volkswagen, and I'm not sure if the Saudi royals are third or fourth on Rivian, but they're big on there too.
Oh,
Um,
I didn't
and
realize that. Are they? Huh?
yeah,
Interesting.
they were either the second or third biggest investor in Rivian, but it was much smaller. It's not like with Lucid where they own 60 to 70% of the
Yeah.
company.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a difference. Rivian is mostly held by RJ and friends. Okay, so
Right.
they have, I don't know how much of the Rivian ownership is in the float as a percentage, but I know that with Lucid only 30% has been sold, and the Saud family owns at least 60%, if not all
Yeah.
70% of the remaining.
In fact, Bobby asked Sandy, "Well, Lucid's an American company, isn't it?" He says, "No, they're a Saudi company."
Yeah, in reality. Yeah.
In
I
reality,
mean,
yeah,
it's their money. It's their
yeah,
money. It's just like,
yeah,
yeah, but by the same token, you want to call Tesla a South African company?
yeah, yeah, exactly, yeah,
It's a global planet. The only difference is I think Lucid's going to start making a lot more cars in the Middle East than they're going to make in the United
yeah.
States.
That was Sandy's comment. He says you'll see them manufacturing cars there, and importing them into Europe, and selling them and exporting them into the Middle East. And I wouldn't surprise me, because it's not that far, to from Saudi Arabia across the Persian Gulf over into India. So I would see them, although it's such an upscale car that it might be beyond, except for a handful of extremely wealthy Indians, it might be beyond the average Indian's means, certainly beyond the average American's means.
Right.
But But yeah, so that'll be happening probably in the next. And interesting, Sandy said that within the next 5 years, half half of all car production in the world will be electric vehicles. Not
Yeah.
mine, Sandy Monroe.
Yeah, I mean, you and I see this. I mean, it only makes sense economically. You can argue about whether you think they catch on fire, which they could, but they don't.
Which
You
is
know,
another point that Sandy made.
yeah, I mean, it's such a
They
minuscule
don't.
thing.
Yeah, they
Yeah,
don't.
yeah, they could. They could. So could a lot
Yeah,
of other things. Your house could
sure.
catch on fire. I mean, I've got a gas hot water heater. I mean, good Lord, what am I
Yeah,
thinking? You
yeah.
know, um, there's all kinds of things that could go wrong. I mean, if you're cooking meth in your house, there's danger of it exploding too. I mean, but I really don't know what to think about some of these
Yeah.
things people come up with. It was crazy that people wouldn't allow, what was it, the Chevy Bolt to be parked in parking garages for a while
Uh-huh.
because there was
Yeah.
so many problems with
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
Bolt. But that
And
was
it
what?
and just we're talking about all the stuff they were talking about. So Sandy says the problem wasn't GM. Everybody takes GM to task for this. The problem was LG Chem. That's where the problem was with the LG Chem batteries that they put in the Volt were flawed, right? And so once they
Mhm.
identified the flaw and fixed it, and of course that they haven't had that problem. But initially, the problem wasn't General Motors. The problem was the LG Chem batteries that they bought and put in the car.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, it's fascinating kind of to see. So, oh, I did get my summary. So here was my summary for the event. Monroe discusses the implications of offshoring manufacturing to China, emphasizing how the Chinese automotive industry has become highly competitive due to strategic investments in raw materials and
Mm-hmm.
advancing manufacturing techniques. The podcast delved into the latest advancements in EVs, including the Cybertruck's innovative use of Ethernet wiring looms, and various battery technologies used
Right.
in different Tesla models. I don't know about the Ethernet thing. I need to investigate that.
Oh,
Um,
so
Challenges for legacy automakers. Monroe critiques traditional automotive companies like GM, Ford, and Volkswagen, discussing the challenges they face in adapting to new technologies and the competitive pressure from Chinese and other international manufacturers.
So speaking of the looms, which is the what is is the wiring system that comes in a bundle of all the wires, and then the people on assembly line that connect them to everything. He says this is the size of the typical. You took all the wires and put them together. This is the size of the typical 12-volt system that runs, does all the communications and talks to the CAN buses and all that kind of thing. That's the size for the typical 12-volt system, which is what we have in virtually all our cars. Cybertruck, which is the first one to introduce a 48-volt system, is that big. One
Oh,
quarter, one quarter the size of the standard loom system that goes in most cars. So you go from that much copper
yeah.
to that much copper.
Well, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah,
That's a big improvement.
huge
Yeah,
improvement.
and it's really hard to fathom, when we talk at people about how the EVs are saying, oh no, they're not, it's not improved manufacturing, it's because EV prices are crashing because they can't sell them. It's like, they
No,
can't sell them?
no,
Yeah, I mean,
no.
we keep every quarter it seems to be a new record of some sort.
Which brings up a question that I'm asking myself is the reason why we have gone there, not that there is an actual slump, it's just that things have sort of, was plateaued a
They've
bit in the
stabilized.
sales. Yeah, it's stable. Well, in the sales of electric vehicles, it still continued to go up. For example, Daimler sold 69% more of their electric buses and trucks in Europe a year over year. So even in that expensive category, that's all going up. But because this technology is improving so fast, right? For cars doing we thought, wow, wow, 200 miles. That's a step. Now we're up to 300 and 400 and 500 miles. And at the same time, the price of that, because of technological improvements and efficiencies in manufacturing and competition in the market, that those prices are coming down. I'm wondering if a significant segment of the buying public is sitting there and saying, well, why should I, my car will work fine for the next year or two. Why don't I wait until I can get a car that does 500 miles, charges in 5 minutes, and costs me $25,000?
Well, think about this. We had Rob Cotter on here from Elf, and
Right,
they're making basically a three-wheeled electric hybrid bicycle that you
right,
pedal, but it's enclosed. It's got some protection from the elements. It's got the solar panel, and the whole thing costs about $10,000.
right.
And then you figure BYD is putting out a
You can buy a
damn
whole
fully
car.
electric car, four doors, and a
Yeah,
hatchback, and
yeah,
it's like $9,000.
yeah,
And so they're
exactly.
selling that cheaper than what he can sell his Elf bike. And I'm
Yeah,
like, damn.
yeah.
Now, he never really was truly manufacturing. They
No,
they were they were getting stuff and they were assembling stuff, putting stuff together. They
right.
probably made a few little parts or whatever, but they basically were having all the parts made for them and they were assembling here in the United States. It might have been completely made in the United States, but you know what I mean. It's not like going
Exactly.
into into what a BYD facility would look like. And he never was able to achieve any scale to get those prices down.
Right.
Obviously, if
Right.
he could have really hit some scale and produced 10,000 of those things a year,
But you
he
have
would have
to
gotten.
you have to have a market that attracts that kind of those kinds of sales, and those kinds of sales is what attracts the money that's
Well,
necessary to scale up and get to the size and introduce the automation and wheedle down the price from suppliers and all that type of thing. It's interesting that Sandy made the comment about the Aptera. And he
mhm,
says the Steve and oh, come on, again, it slips my mind. But the two guys at Aptera spent $175 million to get the car to where it is now, and they're almost to production. He
right,
says that car should have cost, in terms of development, $2 billion. And they were able to do this for a fraction of that. Now, that's a hell of a, still $175 million, a lot of money, but that's a fraction of what it would have cost if you'd gone to General Motors or GM
right,
or Chrysler and said, build me a three-wheel car that runs on solar power energy and gets 1,000 miles on a charge. $2 billion.
right.
So,
Yeah, I mean, it is pretty amazing that they've come as far as they are, but I sure wish
oh
they were
yeah,
really producing and
I
cranking
do.
out cars.
I do too. I so much want to see that car on the road, and I so much want to drive one.
Oh yeah, they look like fun. I have friends who have them on reserve.
Yeah.
So, but we'll see if it comes to market. So let's see here. Let's talk about Gen Z doesn't want to own cars,
Yeah. Then on
or they
the other,
don't want cars. Now, is this supposed to be a nationwide thing, or is this a worldwide
well,
discussion?
I'm assuming that from the article they're speaking in general terms of the U.S. market. But I would suspect that it's probably pretty well globally, um, applicable.
Hmm.
But the idea here is that you know the numbers, and we've seen this historically. I mean, since I started EV World, I've seen this trend where the younger generations just don't have a desire to own number one, to even drive a car,
Hmm.
and because they don't drive a car, they can get to their friends, by other means, for riding with someone who has a car, maybe borrow mom and dad's car, whatever. So there's less of a desire to learn to drive. There's even less of a desire to own a car because it's so expensive. And then there's sort of the background as these kids been growing up, they've been hearing about climate change and global warming and saving the wildlife and hugging the trees and that is part of the motivation for why should I have a car? I can do everything I need to do, and particularly what's attracted to them are, what we would call now walkable neighborhoods, 15-minute communities. I don't need a car. I can buy my, my growing family. I can buy them a cargo bike, where I put a couple of kids in the front seat with some groceries, and mom can, run them around on an electric assist bicycle. So that is sort of where that particular generation is growing up. And I see kids just around here in my neighborhood. They're riding on scooters. They're riding on those uniwheel things, kind of balancing, where that's electric. Kids riding on electric bikes, and even the little kids have these miniature Mercedes, right? And these miniature Jeeps that are electric powered. And I'm thinking, here's a generation of kids that are growing up who may never, as trends continue, may never own a gasoline car. Everything that they drive or ride will be electrically powered at some point.
I think that's only reasonable. Reasonable to assume. I'm almost, when I see some kid riding around on a gas-powered little mini bike of some sort, I'm kind of like, really?
We had a couple last week doing that, and I'm thinking, oh, come on, kids, you're having fun, but you're making a lot of noise and a lot of pollution. And at that same time, there's a kid went tooling up the street out here on one of those, I don't know what those things are, but it's like a skateboard with a single big fat tire in the middle, and you balance it, and and away you go. And a kid was going around, because we're having fiber optic being put in by one of the fiber companies here, and so they're digging up holes, and ran a thing underneath my house back here to put a box in. But the kid going around, doing the spray, that type of thing to identify underground cables, he was going along like a Segway, right?
Oh, wow.
A little stand-up thing, and you go along, and that's how he's getting around. So
on the grass?
Well, no, it was on the, on the street, the sidewalk. He was
running around.
Yeah.
I was driving down the road one day, and I saw somebody on one of those hoverboards. You know what the hoverboard is? It's a little electric thing. It looks like a skateboard, but it has the wheels pointed out on the end, and I saw a guy, he was edging lawns on one of those. He was going really quickly, edging lawns.
Sure, absolutely.
And I'm just like, what the hell? That's for real talent there. Edging lawns on one of those. But all right, so let's get into, what do we got left? Let's talk about your RFK rebuttal. So yesterday we were, Mike and I were talking a little bit, and it wasn't so much that we were trying to have a real discussion about politics as much as what I thought, how I feel Elon is hedging his bets. But I've
to the tune of 140 million, whatever, 180 million, or whatever it is. That's some bet hedging.
Yeah, but to me, I've looked at how much the stock has gone up in the past week. I mean, it's his own interests have gone up billions.
Yeah.
So it was a good announcement for him and Tesla.
It's helped Lucid, although it's down today, and my Rivian, and it really did great. Reached like $18 and something. It's down, today, but that's to be expected. That's all these profit taking that goes on. But yeah, so you guys were talking about. I think you were saying, well, if if Biden bows out, and you keep hearing rumors that may happen. In fact, maybe
he says he's not going to do it. He says he's not going to do it, but he's getting donors and everything backing out. I've heard stories that if for some reason he were to back out and they didn't back Harris and they were going to go to someone else, like say they were going to pick Gavin Newsom or something like that, that they'd have to refund.
Oh, yeah.
A whole lot of the political, the donations. Yes. That doesn't make any sense to me, but I don't know.
Yeah, so it's really interesting. Of course, I was at the local. I'm a Democrat. All right, hate me for it, but whatever. So I was at the local Democratic Party meeting last night, and of course, they're, what are we doing to organize and things like that. so getting back to this RFK comment that that you were making there about, well, we get RFK, and I can almost assure you that that will never happen,
Oh, I
because
don't think it'll happen either.
yeah, there is so much. I mean, I was actually one of the early conferences I attended. RFK was the keynote speaker, and I actually had a chance to, if my memory serves, is I didn't have a chance to talk to him, but I was within close proximity to him before he went on stage. And of course, and you're right. He was sort of the founding guy for River Keepers, which was an environmental group that was trying to clean up, the Hudson River, because over the decades and decades, so many pollutants had been dumped in the river, and then you start trying to dredge and clean it, and it brings all those pollutants and things up. So yeah, he was, founder and principal guiding light of River Keepers, and he had that going for him, but it seems like over the years he's just gotten to the point to where even his family
I've seen that. His family
wouldn't endorse him. So not sure exactly why. He said, "Well, I had a worm in my brain that was eating my whatever." But anyway, but what I found interesting is I picked this book up for 74 cents at the local St. Vincent de Paul, right?
Yeah.
And it's about the handful of Americans who defied the U.S. government and basically snuck into Europe, and they were pilots, and so they could fight on the side of what would become the Allies against the German invasion of Europe. And one of the fascinating things is that one of the principal opponents of U.S. involvement and support of the British and the French governments was our ambassador to the U.K.,
which was
Joseph Kennedy,
which was his grandfather.
And to things that he did to try to prevent the U.S. from getting involved and saving Europe from the Nazis, I can't believe it. And of course, the reason he was the ambassador to the UK is because he was a threat, perceived as a political threat to Roosevelt's second term. And so was a third, that would be the second term. What happened is they appointed him, conveniently, the ambassador to the UK to get him out of the United States. But of course, then war starts, and then he uses all of his influence, because there was a huge segment of the U.S. population that was against getting involved in the war. And it had to take Pearl Harbor for us to begin to say, okay, maybe we have a dog in this fight. We
were a pretty active participant in the war in the Atlantic.
But that was initially somewhat,
even as a neutral.
Somewhat covertly. We had the Lend-Lease program. Churchill wanted, us to sell him, something like 50 destroyers, and to protect the convoys and things, because the Germans were sitting literally off the coast of Long Island, and the Jersey Shore and things like that, and sinking freighters. I forget the exact tonnage, but in 1 month they sunk several 100,000 tons of shipping that was destined, for the war for the Europe. So that was a real shocker, if you will, to me. I mean, obviously, the John F. Kennedy and that strain of the family rejuvenated them somewhat, but what Joe, his grandfather, did was, I guess it was politically expedient, because Roosevelt kept us out of the war as long as he possibly could. But I get that, but to hear that. So I don't, I just never see that he would have any kind of any kind of a serious play in
I get that. I've read a book that was all about Winston Churchill and how his life was intertwined with the Kennedy family. and a lot of it had to do with Joe Kennedy more than it did with, but it went into real heavy into JFK's life and
Hmm.
stuff like that. And of course, it's interesting to see how the world turned out, because a lot
Yeah.
of the world considers Churchill to have been one of the worst people in history.
Yeah. It
Be,
depends
yeah,
on
I
the
mean, a
time
large part of
period and
India, and
yeah.
Churchill's my middle name,
Yeah.
so it's it makes for some fascinating stuff. But anyways, it, we all have opinions on who we like and who we think could do something in politics, and in the greater scheme of things, most of it doesn't make a bit of difference in our regular lives, but it is, sometimes decisions mean a
Yeah.
lot.
Well,
And the only
yeah.
reason I was even willing to discuss politics on the show was just because of the fact that it was something that Musk was doing,
Yeah.
and I
Exactly.
liked what it was doing, which is the EV stocks. And to me, see, I've been kind of worried. So Tesla is going to survive regardless.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, Tesla's
Yeah.
not going out of business if
No.
the EV incentives were to go away under Trump. But I see now this isn't going to happen. But the companies that would really be hurt by it, in my opinion, would be pretty much everybody else.
Yeah. Again,
Okay.
listen to that interview that Robert
Okay.
Llewellyn.
I'm going to listen to it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that it
He
makes for an
basically
interesting topic.
he agrees with what you're saying there. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I'm not a psychic or anything like that, but I never would have really have thought
Swami
that.
hat.
Yeah. I never would have thought of, Musk doing it, because it's kind of traditional for the CEOs of a lot of really big companies to kind of really try to not give their opinion too much or donate money too much to,
Right.
if they're going to give to one party, they're going to give to the other party too.
Right.
So both
Right.
sides are getting money, not
Right.
just one. And so this was kind of an interesting thing. And Biden will come right out and tell, or Elon will come right out and tell you he voted for Biden in the last election, and the
Yeah.
previous election he voted for Hillary. And part of it is he thinks that Biden has kind of crapped on
Well,
him.
is that yeah, and I think that's part of it. And why Biden and and the Harris administration has taken that stance, I really I'm a little perplexed. It may have to do with the fact that Elon's views towards unions that may play a part of it. But for crying out loud, his company is the company it is today because of federal handouts,
So,
and federal
Elon makes this
policies.
comment sometimes about the fact that, so Tesla is a public company, and there's a lot of time he has to devote just to handling things related to it being a public company, but he doesn't have to do with the other organizations he owns, okay, with the other
Yeah,
companies he owns.
yeah,
And but
yeah.
what comes up in this,
SpaceX isn't
SpaceX
a
isn't
public
public.
company. Yeah,
No, but he
yeah,
does have other owners. But
yeah,
here's the thing. He has to do what's best for the shareholders and what's best for the company. And what's best for the shareholders and the company is to not be unionized. So he chooses to pay wages that are high enough that nobody wants to unionize.
yeah.
So what is the difference? So, and in effect, the threat of labor unions forces him to still pay competitive numbers. So I understand that,
So,
that the
so it's a good
UAW does all
thing.
these things.
Yeah,
Yeah. So I'm just saying the actions of the UAW still are benefiting Tesla workers because of that pressure. Now, maybe Elon would have still paid better because he wants the best and the brightest. Who knows?
yeah.
Who knows? That's hard to say, but I'm just saying that there has to be some pressure, because if he was paying crappy wages, they sure would have unionized, right? But you look at, I heard, if you look at, UPS is a good example of where a union seems to work, because they have 350,000 Teamsters members
Yeah.
at UPS. And UPS has for a long time been a highly successful company. And that seems to have worked out, that there's something to the fact that UPS workers get good wages and benefits and
Yeah.
stuff like that and stick around. And it's
And
been
that
good for the
forces
long-term success.
FedEx and hopefully Amazon and others guys to
Yeah. So,
offer similar rates and benefits and things. So yeah,
so, unions certainly have their benefits, but we've also got problems with unions and their leaders being corrupt. And so there's been an awful lot of problems with that over the years too.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know?
This goes back to one of the very reasons that I used to be a Republican as a younger man
Hmm.
was because of that whole unions are supporting Democrats and unions are corrupt, right? Thing. Well, I've gotten older and hopefully wiser, and taken a less critical view, let's say a more positive view of the potential good influence that organized labor can have over the alternative, which is let the companies pay whatever they think they want to pay them, and that may be good or it may not. So, but anyway, that's way off the track
No,
again.
we did get off track again. Yeah, Bill and I tend to go off on tangents.
Yeah,
Folks, we do appreciate y'all watching today.
yeah.
That
Thank
was
you.
all of our topics for today. And we'll be back on Tuesday next week. So
Yeah.
everybody have a great day and thanks for watching.